had a subscriber ask if I would show her how I started my Glitzy shawl. I got a copy of the pattern here, and this is the shawl we're talking about. Now when you're making the shawl, the yarn you're using is very tiny. Let me, if I can enlarge this a little bit so you can see. It's a very thin yarn, but you would use a size 17 needle, so as you can see it's a very large needle to work with such small yarn. Now I didn't bring any of this yarn to show how it works. I'm just going to use regular yarn and make it a little easier to see. But it starts at the bottom with 3 stitches, and as you increase it gets bigger and bigger until you get the 109 or 106 or however many you want. Then you put your fringe on afterwards. Now it says to use a 14-inch needle because you're going to have over 100 stitches on it, and 100 stitches won't fit on one of the 9-inch needles. But since you're starting with just 3, I found if I start on the shorter needle, I have a little more control, and then after I get, say, 50 or 60 or so on this needle, then I start knitting using the long 17-inch needle, and it's a lot more comfortable for me. But you can work it whichever way you want, but you definitely have to have the 14-inch needle to complete it with the 106 or 109 stitches. I just can't remember off the top of my head which one it is. So let me get this out of the way, grab our yarn, see if I can enlarge this a little bit. Let's get the pattern here. Okay, the pattern says, with 1 strand of each yarn, cast on 3 stitches and continue with the 2 strands for the entire pattern. So even though I'm just using 1, I'm just doing it so you can see how it works. So let me put this up here. So now when I do it, I leave a long tail. That way, when I get to the finished product, I don't have to weave the tail in. I just make the tail part of my fringe, and you can't tell. It's just a great way to do it. Okay, so let me leave a tail, cast on 3 stitches. You can cast on in whatever method you prefer. I'm just using this yarn. I probably could have used a thicker yarn, but since this is kind of what you'd actually be working with if you use the 2 strands that are on the shawl itself. So you cast on the 3, and then you start your pattern row. A lot of times I like to knit another roll of 3 just to have more of a foundation because the yarn is so thin. So I'm going ahead and knit 3 more. That's your option, whether you knit the 3 or don't knit the 3. But it feels like you're knitting with logs because these size 17 needles are so big. But that's what causes the shawl to be so lacy, because each of your stitches are big. Okay, now we start where you knit 1, increase in the next, increase in the next stitch, knit to the end. In this case, it's just 3 stitches, but it works for the entire pattern. So you knit 1. Now we're going to increase, which means you knit in the front loop and the back loop of that second stitch. And that gives you 2. And then you knit to the end, whether it's 1 stitch, 3 stitches, 5 stitches. All right. And then you rotate your work. Now the next one says knit 1, increase, knit to the end. So we're going to do it again. There's only 5 rows in this entire pattern, and I'll explain why there's a 5th unusual row. There's a reason for it, and I'll explain it when I get to row 5. So I'm doing my increase, knitting in the front and the back, then knit to the end. In this case, I knit 2. So that now takes me up to 5 stitches from my original 3. Okay, let's do it again. Row 3, knit 1, increase in the next stitch, knit to the end. So we'll do that. We're going to knit 1. After you knit for a while, you will get comfortable. Now we're going to increase in this, so you knit in the front. Do not take it off the needle. Leave it on the needle, because now you want to knit in the back loop of this same stitch, and then knit to the end. In this case, we're going to knit 3. 2, 3. Okay, now that's row 3. Now you see how big and open the stitches are? That's what gives it the lacy look without actually doing lace. Now row 4, knit 1, increase in the next stitch, knit to the end. So let's do that. Turn it around, knit 1, increase in the next stitch, so we knit in the front, leave the stitch on the needle, rotate the needle around, and knit in the back loop of that same stitch. And that gives you your increase. Then knit to the end. Now we're up to 4. Now row 5 is a little bit different. It's the same, but it's a little bit different. And after I do row 5, I'll explain why. Okay, row 5 says knit 1, increase the next stitch, knit to the second to the last stitch, increase in the second to the last stitch, knit 1. So we're going to knit 1, increase in this stitch, knit in the front and the back loop, just like we did before. Knit to the second to the last stitch. And these 5 rows are repeated for the entire pattern. So now we're going to increase in this stitch. So we knit in the front, rotate, and knit in the back, and knit in the last stitch. Now after you've done those 5 rows, you can see how it's widening. You turn your work and you start back with row 1, where you knit 1, increase, knit to the end. Same with 3, 4, 2, 3, and 4. And on the next row, which would be row 10, same thing, knit 1, increase in the next stitch, knit to the second to the last stitch, increase in the second to the last stitch, knit 1. I found out when you're working on the size 17 needles, if you just do the 1 increase on the one side, your shawl gets very long and does like this, because it doesn't have a chance to expand. So by adding that extra increase every 5 rows, you're going to get something that expands more this way. And on this time, the second increase is on this side, and when you do row 10, then the next time your increase will be on this side. So the second increase rotates off from one side to the other. So that's what gives you your shawl that nice tapered look. And like I said, I use this tail as part of my fringe. So after I bind it off, I add my fringe and I connect it right here. So you got your fringe and your tail, and you keep going up with your fringe on both sides, and you never see your tail. Now, if you like what you see, please subscribe to the Stitch Niche video YouTube, or go to stitchniche.com to find additional patterns and variety of yarns. Thank you for watching.